Hello and welcome to Healing Tips from the Heart, Intuition with Helpers, Healers, and Guides. I am your host, Dr. Lori Hops, licensed psychologist, writer, and artist. I've explored mind, body, and spirit related to intuition, or your personal guidance system, since early childhood. Meet my guests who have learned from their personal and professional lives to explore vast realms of knowing, synchronicities, and overcoming challenges. Their stories may inspire you with tools to enhance your daily living and relationships. Hello, everyone, and welcome my special guest for today, Dr. Michael DeMolina. Michael brings a transpersonal approach to his work in psychotherapy as a clinical supervisor, consultant, and trainer. He is the founder and president of the Wisdom Training Institute and Wisdom Traditions Integrative Behavioral Health in Alaska. He's past president of the National Qigong Association, holds a master's degree in adult education and a doctorate in Archetypal Studies and DreamWork. He also recently has a certificate in Psychedelic-Assisted Therapy from the California Institute of Integral Studies and Lykos Therapeutics. He is an initiated Paqo in the Womanlipa lineage of Peru. He's a master trainer of emotional freedom technique, tapping, energy psychology, and neuro-linguistic programming, psychotherapy. He also has recently created a nonprofit focusing on education, advocacy, research, and treatment called the Wisdom Network. And he and his team certify therapists and life coaches around the world. So welcome, my special guest. Hello, Michael.
Thank you so much, Lori. It's a real pleasure to be here with you.
And I'd like everyone to know that I've had the pleasure of meeting you through the Association for Comprehensive Energy Psychology, where I have been a student in your wonderful classes. You always teach the most interesting, intriguing information with your heart, soul, and body, mind, and spirit. Yes. And spent time with you in person and online with different things and leadership positions that we've been in a couple of committees, things like that. So it's I'm so grateful that you're here today to share you with the rest of the world through this podcast.
I really appreciate the invitation, and I really love the work that you're doing with the podcast as well, because that's all about spreading the word, lighting candles. You know, the whole idea of one candle lighting another does not diminish either. And I just love the way that you walk through the world as well, Lori.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So yeah, go ahead. Is there anything else you'd like to share at this point with the audience?
I think I'll continue the footnotes for another hour.
So I know we wanted to speak about psychedelics. This is kind of a term that maybe people heard in the 60s and 70s if they were around then, or they look back in history, and then maybe not so much in popular culture, and now it seems like it's everywhere. So could you kind of describe a little bit about what this is, and maybe then also about your involvement and any pearls that you may want to share with us?
Yes, and feel free to interrupt and ask some more questions as I go, because I could probably talk for an hour on this intersection between energy medicine, energy psychology, EFT tapping specifically, and the emerging realm of psychedelic-assisted therapies and research. There aren't too many people who are looking at the intersection and the space where both of these fields can overlap, connect, and have a synergistic effect for psychological healing. And that's something that there's a community of practice at ACEP, the Association for Comprehensive Energy Psychology, where there's a gathering number of people who are interested and using techniques in a synergistic and integrative way.
Great. Yeah, thank you. Well, maybe let's start with psychedelics, and then we'll do a brief overview of these other areas that you're talking about, and then we can kind of put them together.
Yeah. And so there's a lot to say about psychedelics, but mostly it's about destigmatizing them at this point. And so the realm of psychedelics, even as you did your intro, you started the story in the 1960s. We could say the 1960s were actually more like the rebellious adolescence of the realm of therapeutic psychedelics. And the actual story goes back into the 1920s. And not to give an entire century of history, but for those who are interested, there's a lot on the internet, of course, and books being written. But imagine, for instance, some of our, I'll say, grandparents of our field in transpersonal psychology were using therapeutic psychedelics in the 1920s. People whose names you know, like Gregory Bateson and his then wife, wow, Margaret Mead, yes. Um,
Okay.
and there's a book that's out on that. I think it's called Tripping on Utopia, and it's all about the proper ethical and medical use of psychedelics. And so we could say really the infancy is there, and then like as we look back to our childhood 60s or 70s, let's say, we have other kinds of images, for instance Timothy Leary and the rockin' and rolling 1960s. And I think the first thing I like to do in this conversation is to say, well, people will tell you like Timothy Leary started the psychedelic movement, and the first thing I say is no, actually he contributed to the end of
Mhm.
phase one of the psychedelic movement. This oppression, and even the people who would consider themselves open-minded and open-hearted people are so cautious about psychedelics. It frankly has been social programming from the early 1970s. And then that continued even into the mid 1980s with MDMA. Its street name is ecstasy, but the preference right now would be to just call it by its chemical name,
Mhm.
MDMA. And again, there was research at Harvard, at Stanford, at Imperial College in London. There was research, especially at Johns Hopkins by Bill Richards, who were using this because the use of MDMA, by the way, is not a psychedelic. It's an empathogen. And an empathogen, meaning it doesn't give you visuals or fractals or anything like that. What it does is it increases empathy. So that
Mhm.
thus we call it empathogen.
Mhm.
And that's why MDMA is on the cutting edge here in the year 2024, 2025, as a therapeutic intervention for depression and trauma. That's why it's MDMA, because some people say, why that one? Because if there were a medication for trauma, it would be increased levels of empathy, which leads someone to connection, pro-social behavior. They talk about the trauma in the clinical sessions, forgiveness,
Mhm.
self-forgiveness. And it with therapists in the room, and we can talk later about what the actual clinical container is around all of this.
Mhm.
People are having a resolution for depression, for trauma, meaning that they no longer meet the criteria for a diagnosis of depression or trauma based on DSM. The signs and symptoms literally are not met. They're neutralized
Wow.
at the level of 70% effectiveness. There is nothing else that gives that level of mitigation of PTS more than 70%.
Incredible.
That's what the two phase three trials showed.
Wow.
So that's and as quickly as I could do 100 years
Yeah.
of history
Yay.
to the moment that we're in right now.
Yeah, yeah. Beautiful. Thank you for that. Wow, what a synopsis. It's kind of mind-blowing. All the different streams, the political, the social, the spiritual, the biochemical, like all these streams are coming together and these powerful healing modalities that can be used, abused, enhanced. And when things become so powerful like this, then they become sought after, a threat potentially, and can be open the door to manipulation for different outcomes. So, wow, that's really, really incredible. And so, as we're beginning our discussion,
Mhm.
could you please just describe in a very simple term, what are psychedelics? For those who may not know, they may have heard the term and or don't know, or they get it confused with something else.
Exactly right, Lori. And there's so much misinformation. Part of my current mission, if not anything else, is to put the what's being called the psychedelic renaissance into the therapeutic container and talking about the legal, ethical, and even we could say psychospiritual, results of the use of psychedelics. And there are a lot of different things that are getting kind of clumped into that word psychedelics. So psychedelics themselves are LSD, psilocybin mushrooms, DMT5, and mescaline. So using then the plant medicine verbiage, psilocybin, magic mushrooms, um, DMT is the active ingredient in ayahuasca. And because of my training and my lineage in Peru, I prefer to use the term Madre Ayahuasca because that's how it's referred as the mother. And then mescaline is a peyote.
Hmm.
And I do have very specific lines that I'm drawing in the sand that I believe that we should honor and respect indigenous traditions. For example, peyote is already being poached and over harvested to the point where it's already endangered.
Mm.
And the mass amount of it growing, of course, in the Southwest is on reservation land,
Hmm.
little land that we as a government have given those traditions, and people are feeling very free to just walk into reservation land and cut the peyote and then sell it, into an underground market. And so the first thing for those who are interested in this kind of topic is, as I say, respect the wisdom traditions, the spiritual traditions of each one of these indigenous ways of knowing, and that the plant medicine has been part of a healing tradition for thousands of years.
Hmm.
And to be very frank, let's just leave that alone. There are other ways of having these experiences in a healing way within the container uh, of transpersonal psychology, which I'm sure we'll get to here in another moment as well. So
Okay.
those are psychedelics. And the terms used, and I'm just, doing my best to have a psychedelic literacy,
Yes.
right? Okay. They're the ones who are going to give a visual effect, like a fractal. Those are the ones that are going to give, an auditory effect. They have the ability to bring someone into their own internal alignment. And for example, in the state of Oregon, as we speak, January 2025, their own law clicked over where one does not have to be an Oregon citizen anymore to have a license to be a sitter for somebody else in a therapeutic way. Now people can apply. Of
A
course, you have to
sitter meaning what? Sorry. Yeah, sorry.
sit with people as a coach or as a coach, right? You don't have to have a license as a therapist. So Oregon's written it so that there can
Wow.
be people who are sitting, that's the term that's used,
Mm.
to guardian the physical safety, hold the sacred space, create ceremony if that is what the person wants. Not really a client, right? But it's the journeyer, if you will.
Hmm.
Um, and there is a certification process through the state of Oregon that one can apply to be able to midwife, if you will,
Mm.
someone, and as they're having vision. For example, one can have their blessed grandmother come in a vision and teach a lesson or remind a journeyer of a lesson that they learned in childhood, or simply give a blessing. And those kinds of things can happen And not to get too far afield of your question, but those are those are lifetime cathartic experiences, for the journeyer, saying like, that's right, this is some wisdom I knew from childhood, or even this is something I forgot I knew, but
Yeah.
now I need it in my current life situation,
Mhm.
and now I can apply it.
Beautiful. So it makes me wonder, if I may ask a
Yeah, of
question,
course.
is so we know that there are chemicals that you can ingest, inhale, um, and it causes these states to be more likely to occur. You mentioned transpersonal. So would psychedelic experiences also include something that's not ingested or inhaled? A psychospiritual, natural moment where you have these visions or fractals or visitations that can happen
Mhm.
spontaneously, or maybe during meditation or during sleep or during ecstatic moments.
Yes.
Okay. Because I didn't know if that's like considered separate. Like it matters the path that you took to get there, or is it the there that you get to? It doesn't matter what path.
I think that, of course, I think as you ask the question, you know the answer. And I have a long answer, if you will. So, what I noticed as being a student of NLP, energy psychology, energy medicine, TaiChi, Qigong, all that stuff in my bio, over the past 35 plus years now, that the people I was studying with were all people who in the 60s and 70s were partaking of psychedelics. Every single one of them.
Mhm.
Okay. So those who we call the elders and the founders now have their origin in a consciousness opening experience that they had when they were youth, especially in the West Coast of the United States. And it was not so stigmatized then, as we talked about in the history.
Mhm.
And let's take as example Alex and Allison Gray, who draw these beautiful, beautiful illustrations of the energy body. Now, where is it you think they got the image from? Is that their own internal imagery has been enhanced, their intuition is enhanced by, and they're very open about this, by the way, so I'm
Mhm.
not speaking out of school, but they have the ability to see energy in a way that someone else might not be because that they had these experiences. And I will also share that they weren't just like using some drugs under a tree one day. They were in communities with each other.
Mhm.
There were containers, there were therapists in the room. There were doctoral level medical doctors and psychologists, part and parcel of these communities before psychedelic prohibition started. That's what we need to get back to is supportive sangha, right? Spiritual communities that can hold these experiences in place and make sense of them for the people who are having visions, for instance. And we haven't even gotten to the other medications that aren't psychedelics, right? We're just still talking about those.
Right, right. That was kind of the focus today, but we can go there for sure.
Yeah. So then when we talk about therapy, we have energy psychology, we have EFT tapping, we have brain spotting, we have EMDR, we have all of these excellent bottom-up therapies, right?
Bottom
And
up meaning.
yes, bottom-up is the term that's used for the trauma-informed systems that instead of cognitive behavioral therapy, which is talking about the problem, or I kind of jokingly say talking at the problem,
Mhm.
right, is being able to go into the root cause of a trauma, finding specific events or finding where the energy disruption is, finding a thought field or a schema that is the root cause of the problem, and being able to, go upstream, if you will, which is typically earlier in life, and being able to neutralize the impact that a specific event has had that trickles into the rest of the person's life. So we do have excellent therapies. So part of the answer to your question is yes, we have excellent therapies, and they should continue to be used.
Hmm.
Like the use of clinical psychedelics should not be considered in lieu of, but instead be considered as a part of trauma-informed and trauma-sensitive care.
Done ethically
Yeah,
and
ethically,
carefully.
clinically with people who are trained in both.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you for that so much. Um, it's opening the door to new possibility. I love how you said that the history of a lot of the teachers on the West Coast of the United States currently had psychedelics in their earlier personal histories, and so that kind of opened them up to a different state of consciousness, and it's embedded in who they are. So even if they're not teaching that, it's sort of like the rest, the soup that they were, in.
Yeah, that they
Um,
came from, right?
yeah,
The soil from which they came in
yeah,
their youth of the 70s
yeah,
was at least informed through the psychedelic movement.
yeah, yeah. And that's often true. I know we were going to talk about wisdom traditions from around the world. And you mentioned a little bit about that in terms of peyote and other botanicals that are grown around the world and have been found to have psychedelic and transpersonal properties for spiritual development. And
Exactly.
yeah, and so it would be probably common in other cultures to say, yes, the spiritual leaders of our time, whatever time that was, were informed by plants and psychedelics and spiritual experiences too. They're all kind of connected to each other.
Right. If we look at the tradition, the 10,000 or probably 20,000 year tradition of healers and shamans from around the world, we know from a fact that they were employing three, what we would now call interventions, a very clinical colonial term, but let's say three modes of healing. First and foremost, ritual and ceremony, which has a healing effect of protecting people from stress. Every therapist in the world is using some level of ritual and containment.
Hmm.
Second, they were using some version of the energetic biofield of the body. In China, of course, meridians, in India, chakras. But if we look at the indigenous traditions of the Americas, I was so pleased my first year in the Sacred Valley of Peru. They said, "Oh, let us teach you our energy exercise as your preparation for anything else you might do." And they promptly taught me what we in the US would at least call Qigong, which is a Chinese term for an energy exercise. They had their own qigongs. They're
Hmm.
just not as well known in the U.S. or in Western culture as the Chinese culture is, but they have their own healing system that is very heart chakra based, more so than the other systems. So ritual ceremony, energy, and plants,
Hmm.
right? Not just the psychedelic plants that happen to have some DMT in them, but the entire materia medica of the botanicals that the earth itself gives in
Hmm.
each one of these places in the world.
Hmm.
For example, here's another one is iboga from Africa. That is being researched for 30 years for addictions.
Oh.
Research is indicating that people who would take, I think, just like one clinical, ethical, right, use, which means therapists and doctors are involved, and the meaning making that's coming out of the experience, just like the shamans of old, we can use our transpersonal approach, our Jungian archetypal approach to therapy, which is now called for more than CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, not so much in the frontal lobe, but more about our essence of our beingness, our
Hmm.
energy field, and our holistic intellectual, emotional, spiritual self.
Hmm.
And when that kind of work is being done, check this out, people are reporting 9 months after one session, zero cravings for drugs or alcohol.
Wow.
Zero. Zero. So then I was talking to his doctor who wanted to be a critic of the work, and he
Mhm.
says like, well, that just means that after 9 months they're just going to want to get another hit. I said, really? So let me introduce, and I know I'm talking a lot of clinical medical here, but this is why I'm emphasizing that we need to just like think through this.
Mm,
So if we could take a street addict who's strung out on opiates and do one session and there's zero cravings for 9 months, and we can put them into any intensive outpatient program that's anywhere in the country or the world for 9 months, and then teach them all the life skills that they need in order to live a sober life. And we're not fighting the craving cycle.
right.
Maybe we call that a win.
Yes.
Right. This is the way we need to start to think about the appropriate use of psychedelics. And iboga, again, isn't even a psychedelic. Technically, it's a nicotine receptor antagonist.
Oh,
Right. And so that's why, the word psychedelic doesn't even describe everything that
yeah.
this kind of conversation encompasses.
Yep, yep. And let's expand that view of the street addict to all addicts.
Right, alcoholic, but also behavioral process, right? Overeating, gambling. The big thing now is video games,
Yeah,
pornography.
yeah,
Almost any behavior can become an addiction if we understand addictive in a more broad sense, which is a behavior that one engages in to kind of cover up their own processes, their own thoughts, their own feelings, their own trauma, their own processes.
right. Yeah,
Right.
interesting about the nicotine because I know that the craving cycles are so rapid. Um,
Yes.
and so it's like if you can capture that quick, rapid craving cycle and kind of neutralize that, then the slower wave of crave, even for stronger drugs, maybe is going to be more successful. That's fascinating. So let me, yeah, you were going to say something, I can tell.
Yeah, so I was just gonna, yeah, bring that back around
Yeah.
to bottom-up therapies are going to still be needed and still be a part of the integration process.
Hmm.
Parts work, internal family systems, the things that certain cutting-edge therapists know how to do and approach are still needed because then the question comes up, what do you do in those 9 months? You help the person heal without fighting a craving cycle.
Yeah.
So we would still do the work that many of us have been doing.
Beautiful. Thank you for so much for that. Wow. Okay. So we've gone to, psychedelics, therapeutic use, ethical use with the clinical safety and understanding of the dynamics of what can happen, what can go wrong. And then also um, the bottom-up therapies that deal with the energy field, the thought fields, and the emotional stuckness or frozenness where trauma happens and how to release that. It's not
Mhm.
just the thinking about it or talking at it.
Yep.
And then combining them together, which, not everyone's going to be trained in both systems. But what do you see as if I were a sitter coming to Oregon and I didn't know about energy psychology, what would you say would be the advantage of having these bottom-up therapies combined with the appropriate use of psychedelics?
Hmm. So to go into Oregon, I would highly recommend to get certified.
Hmm.
Does one have to do that? I'm not actually very clear in this moment what the Oregon law specifically says, but from what I understand, Oregon has passed legal use of psilocybin specifically. If anyone wants to do is called to the work, whether they're licensed or they want to be kind of a life coach or what we might call an integration coach,
Hmm.
please get trained. Please get certified. Do not bypass the best thinking of all of the thought leaders of the last 100 years that we just talked about
Hmm.
engage in what it means to be a responsible sitter and guide. And that means to do specific training in regard to at least one, if not two, systems that help someone integrate and meaning making. When we're looking at the MAPS is the organization, the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Science is MAPS. And they've been working for 38 years on the legalization of psychedelics, as we're discussing. And they've
Hmm.
created that model, and they went through the FDA process since 19, I want to say 86. And so many people are just hearing about psychedelics, like, oh my gosh, where's this coming out of left field? But there's been uh, quietly at first what we all kind of know about how the FDA works. There's phase 1 trials, they hone it in, what works, what doesn't. There's phase 2 trials, they hone it in. What universities are doing this? Again, Johns Hopkins, Stanford, Imperial College in London, many others. There's professors and researchers across the world who have been moving this forward. Then there was 2 phase 3 trials. What we now know about the neuroscience of these psychedelics and related substances is, first of all, I think many people now know about the amygdala, which is in the center of the brain. They're about the size of an almond. There's one on the left side, there's one on the right side, and they live right underneath the library of memories in the brain called the hippocampus. And the amygdala is the part of the brain that tells you to freak out. Yeah, the amygdala are the parts that are in charge of fear response, but also, to get more sophisticated now, it's not just fear. It's fight, flight, freeze, or even fawn, F-A-W-N. The fawning behaviors are a trauma response. Okay? And the amygdala in all of these psychedelics have this one thing in common. They're able to turn the amygdala
Yeah.
during the period of the session itself. We haven't talked about ketamine yet, but we should get to ketamine at some point because it's the legal thing that we are using right now.
Hmm.
Ketamine for 2 hours, the amygdala is turned off. MDMA, 5 or 6 hours, with 2 therapists in the room, the amygdala is turned off. Psilocybin, 5 or 6 hours. LSD, 8 hours, 12 hours. And the therapy that it can occur when there is no fight or flight, freeze or fawn response is direct exposure to a trauma memory without activation. So to one of your other questions, can we have psychospiritual experiences without psychedelics? The answer is yes. But even as a Tai Chi teacher, people would say, like, how do I get to enlightenment? From the traditions, you would say, well, 20 years of meditation.
Hmm.
But what if it can happen in 12 hours with a teacher and guide in the room? That's the difference here. Many people are responding to psychedelics and saying you can get 1 year of therapy done in 3 sessions
Wow.
using the MAPS models, which means
Wow.
2 therapists in the room, holding space, and then integrating. I haven't forgotten the question about integration.
Okay, so if I could just summarize real quick in my own language, it would be that we have a natural built-in alarm system that lets us know when we are potentially in danger or think that we might be, and that it tends to be, with a trauma situation, hypersensitive. It can go off inappropriately. So hearing, if you have been, let's say, afraid of dogs and you hear the sound of a dog barking, but it's not a real dog, your body might go into an alarm state, thinking, oh no, there's a dog nearby. Or smelling the odor of the dog hair can get you, cranked up and excited and worried. And so these and this happens with trauma. So when you try to get to treating the trauma, the natural defense of, oh no, oh, this isn't safe comes up, and then you're not available for a deeper processing because you're trying to basically save your life or run away or fall into collapse as a way of saving yourself or go into a fear state. But when you artificially remove that alarm system and you quiet it for a period of time, then it's almost like a surgery. You can kind of bypass it and go into the deeper trauma that's there, and in a loving and safe and gentle way, knowing ahead of time what you're going for, having permission, then you can go in and start to work on unearthing these stuck energies, these traumas that wind up, being not needed any longer in your life. The effects of them are no longer needed. And so it's a healing process. So is that a fair summary?
You're awesome.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for translating me.
Well, I just want to make sure I'm accurate because I am not trained in
You're
this field.
golden.
Yeah.
They're golden.
Okay.
And there's more, as they
Yes.
say.
Yes, always.
We're still getting to this integration, this idea of integration.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, oh, well, thank you. Thank you. And so there's another part of the brain called the default mode network, or DMN, default mode network.
Mm-hmm.
And this is many parts of the brain who together essentially network out the sense of who I am, the sense of identity. And what gives me my sense of identity is my thoughts, my belief systems, my background, but maybe most importantly, the story I tell about myself. The narrative, and this is where the narrative therapy people really got it right. The narrative that I tell about myself could be causing me more pain and distress.
Yeah.
Now, there's a part of the brain in charge of that, right? We could talk about the committee upstairs, right? And in AA, is it okay if I use an AA term? They call it the shitty committee.
Okay.
The part of our brain that would be very critical, right? It's the part of our brain that would, frankly, be even self-abusive
Mm-hmm.
for some people who grew up in certain homes of complex trauma. It's the part of the brain, even for just normal, regular person who typically would say, "I'm not worth the time to eat well, or to walk around the block, or get some level of exercise, or to spend money on a therapist for me. That would be so selfish of me to take care of myself that way."
Mm-hmm.
Now, those are all stories we tell about ourselves. Those are the examples. The part of the brain that's in charge of that default mode network, also the volume gets turned down during the psychedelic session and even turns off for just a couple of hours.
Okay.
Now, most people are familiar with this idea of neurogenesis and neuroplasticity, but let's review. Neurogenesis means new brain cells, new neurons being born.
Mm-hmm.
Neuroplasticity says even the neurons that we have aren't stuck in concrete, they can shift and change. How do they shift and change? By the story we tell about ourselves. We can change it. So now what's happening is, after a session, there is a period of about 3 months, 90 days, in which we are rewriting our own narrative. That's integration.
Okay.
That's the role for the coach, the integration coach. That's the role for the therapist who has some level of trauma-informed care, one of those bottom-up therapies. That's the role, because we are now assisting without projecting our own psychological material. We're assisting the person in meaning making in a new way, while there's these new neural pathways being born, and there's plasticity where we can actually change the architecture and structure of the memory itself.
Beautiful. What an opportunity. It's a magical opportunity. It's like the whiteboard gets erased.
Yes.
And you get to create something new. And if you probably do nothing, I would imagine it would go back to its original messaging, programming.
It does. And that's where I'm standing so strongly against recreational use of psychedelics. This is my position is not advocating for recreational use. And that's something I need to say over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
Very strong advocacy for clinical and ethical use, because when in our lives do we get a chance like this to rewrite our own personal narrative of how we think and feel and experience ourselves? And we can really use the tools of energy psychology, EFT. A lot of neuro-linguistic programming is about rewriting the programs. That's why they chose that word P for programming. We get to rewrite childhood programs.
So here's a question for you. And I'm thinking about all the situations of spiritual journeying that I've done and other people have done, where there's often these really intensive experiences followed by sometimes 3 to 4 months of changing
Mhm.
your diet, changing your, what you're thinking, your daily practice. So it's capitalizing on, it's, intensifying that period, that window, and trying to build in new habits and new
Mhm.
processes. So here's my question. If I would imagine that having your identity erased in a sense, or loosened, or
That might be a
softened.
scary word for someone to say erase. That might be scary.
Yes.
So I need to be really clear. It's not erased.
Okay.
In fact, it's still there. It's just the volume gets turned down. I think
Okay.
that's an important distinction.
Okay. Thank
How
you.
scary would it be, right? To go, oh, erase. What's that
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Just gets turned down for several hours and then comes back up, but then capable of being like editing the lyrics to a song, rewriting a line to a poem,
Okay.
right? Like the opportunity to say, like, why do people not follow through on their diets? Is kind of where you're going. It's because at some point they tell themselves, this is easier. This is, easy. Fast food is easier. They're telling a story to themselves.
Or they're still in the same context that created the problem in the first place.
Exactly.
Okay, so it isn't so much of a loss of identity that someone goes through an existential crisis and doesn't know who they are any longer.
hmm It shouldn't be with appropriate dosage. Now we're talking about that there are clinical thresholds to dosage.
Mm-hmm.
Can there be an overdose of a psychedelic? Yes,
Mm-hmm.
that's still a medical concern. That's why we want to tap into the medical community. It was why we want to educate the medical community on appropriate dosage, dose, amount, frequency, duration, all the things that Western medicine has already determined for all the other medications.
Yeah. And I imagine it's also like all the other medications, idiosyncratic to the person.
Yes, there's certainly a portion of that based on the past personal history, but also, and I always so much appreciate the work you do in the world where you're talking about, releasing someone's own inner intuition. What if someone already is predisposed to, my example of my grandmother coming and visiting me? That
Right.
was a real story, right? And reminding me of something that she taught me at 5. You know what I mean? So we could be very Western about that and say, well, Michael, it was just a released memory of something you already had. Yeah, that could be true. Or it could have been a visitation based on who you are as a human being, right? And that's your point. And I really want to fully support that many, many of us have worked our lives to develop our intuition,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And to become aware of our energy body, which is what Qigong is all about, right? Or to enhance our intuition or even to trust it more. So all of that work that I know that you are doing is crucial as the preparation stage before someone might even choose to work with a plant medicine. I would consider all of that as preparation stage.
Mm-hmm.
As example, when I went to Peru, I mentioned this, and I originally asked about it, about working with Madre Ayahuasca, and they said, well, first, let us teach you our energy exercises.
Mm-hmm.
I did those for many years prior to anything else in the tradition to prepare my energy body and to prepare myself psychologically.
Yeah.
And to me, that's honoring the sacredness of this.
Yeah.
The psychedelics should never become a profane act. It has its roots in Mother Earth. It has its roots in the shamanic healing traditions. We, as psychologists, therapists, doctors, kind of hold that archetypal energy in our Western society. And if we kind of take our role seriously, we can include the intuition in order to heal trauma
Beautiful.
because they're not different from each other.
No, they're not. And I'm sure that someone who is more intuitively attuned during these experiences may have a different sort of quality or depth of
Mhm.
experience. I would even imagine that the dreams would change beforehand, just setting the intention for having the
Exactly.
experiences, then you already start to get waves of it entering into your consciousness.
And that's what I got my doctoral degree in, was actually dream therapy. And I find that the training, the 10-year training I went through as a Jungian archetypal dream therapist is very, very parallel to working integration with people's dreams or people's visions,
Wow. Yeah.
helping helping people take their unconscious material
Mhm.
and bring it to consciousness.
Yeah.
That's integration.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you. So I know we could go on and on. I feel like we've kind of like hit moments around the world across the board. Is there anything that's still remaining that you wanted to kind of tie together in this conversation now?
I said I was going to get back to ketamine
Okay.
because that's what's legal.
Okay.
There are at this moment 2,000 ketamine clinics up and running in the United States. It has been approved by the FDA for treatment-resistant depression. So I do want to, invite listeners to consider the threshold of the appropriate use of ketamine. And I'm fairly certain that these other things are going to be passed by the FDA, even if it's a couple of years out. It's just a matter of time because the statistics continue to come in. It's 70% reduction of trauma, 90% reduction of cravings. I mean, the research is amazing.
Mm.
So in regard to ketamine, I want to describe it as, in this case, it's a dissociative anesthetic. It is not, it's the opposite of some of the other ones that we've talked about today. And what that does, again, there's options to use it at home. I would ask everyone to not to do that. Find a therapist in your community or even in your state that's willing to do sitting, that's trained to do sitting with you, so they can hold space for you during the session and engage in this kind of integration therapy or integration coaching that we've been talking about.
Mm.
Dissociative anesthetic leads us to this other kind of internal experience. It's going to be about a 2-hour experience, and it's an anesthetic, so it's like that dream-like state that we were just talking about. And like when you just wake up, Lori, and you're halfway in the dream and you're halfway awake, and you have an awareness of both worlds for just
Mhm.
like that less than 1 minute. Imagine having it for about 2 hours
Mhm.
and being able to have a bridge between conscious and unconscious realms.
Mhm.
And then imagine an integration coach or integration therapist that can help you bridge that. Meeting yourself in a total ability to have empathy and integration, connection, self forgiveness, or a younger part of oneself, and having a learning or a lesson and having that experience, being able to talk to an integration coach or integration therapist, and again, new meaning making coming out of that through after medicine integration sessions.
Okay.
So just really want to touch on what's available now in a legal and ethical way.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Would you say that that's a more yin approach than psychedelics that could be more yang, or not really?
It's a really super interesting question. I mean, you're asking a Taoist Tai Chi guy, a yin and yang question here. But yin and yang don't exist one without the other.
True.
They're always relative one to the other. So is ketamine yin? as related to MDMA, which does have a little bit of a amphetamine in it.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. One would be more quiet.
Yeah.
And MDMA, one of the reasons it's so good for trauma, by the way, is because there's that added energy boost that leads to pro-social behavior, meaning people are more likely to talk through the trauma with MDMA, whereas
Oh,
a ketamine session would be very quiet and internal experienced.
oh, interesting.
Yeah, different medicines for different clinical reasons.
Yeah, and you want to make sure that you're not overmatching the natural tendency. So if someone has a natural tendency to push away, to quiet, to not think, to be a little bit less detail oriented, more slippery, more, you might not want more of that.
You know, you really bring up a very important purpose of having a coach or therapist in the room, or at least holding space, is that if I've been dealing with some kind of event from my past, either weeks, months, year, or years, or a lifetime, of course I'm going to want to avoid it, right?
Yes,
Like
right.
that's part of the survival skill of living on this rotating mud ball of the planet Earth, is we find ways of dissociating ourselves
Yeah.
from our own past personal history. So even in a medicine session, the medicine's not quote unquote doing it for you. As Aldous Huxley said in the 1950s, he wrote this book called The Doors of Perception. And he says, the psychedelics can lead you to the doors of perception. It can even open up the door, but you still have to walk through.
Hmm.
You're still lucid during these experiences.
Hmm.
That fear factor of avoidance could absolutely still pop up. And that's the purpose of having the coach or the therapist there, is to say, now's your window, now's your chance. Trust, let go, release. This is why you're here.
Yeah.
Move through it. It's okay. You're safe. Move towards it. And Bill Richards from Johns Hopkins has a great metaphor for this. He says, if you meet a dragon during one of these experiences and you want to run the other way, choose to go toward the dragon.
Mm.
And if the dragon opens its jaws to devour you, you walk through the mouth of the dragon.
Yeah.
And if you're afraid of going into the belly of dragon, move into the belly and turn around and look through the dragon's eyes at yourself.
Oh.
And there is the medicine.
Oh. And we are now complete. I love it. I love it. I love how the archetypal story came in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jonah and the whale.
Yes.
Same
Absolutely
thing, being
so.
swallowed by the monster, and then
Yeah.
the rebirth that happens after when you go into the belly of the whale, and how you find
Mhm.
yourself again, and what you're running away from, and what you're trying to avoid, and how sometimes you have to go into the storm. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Oh, this has been so delightful. I know I could go on and on. Is there anything else you'd like to share before we say goodbye for today?
I want to make sure that everyone understands that from this, professional, clinical, research-oriented best practice model, um, that really there's a prevailing ethic that's important for us to talk about. And the ethic should always be about the free will and agency and autonomy, to include body autonomy, of the identified client or patient, depending on, if you're a coach or medical professional. And what that means is very specific here, because I think many people would say, check box, of course, agency, free will, self-determination, autonomy. But in this realm, we're working with people who, by definition, are going to be in a vulnerable position and under our care. This is the highest level honor and the highest level ethics, and I might even say morals, to do this work. It's the highest level sacred opportunity to assist another human being in healing and perhaps even an enlightenment experience. And that's one of the reasons, by the way, that I believe that we should have these plant medicines passed so that people don't have to work in the underground to have an experience, because then there's no way of measuring ethics and morals and sacred containers. We should have it legalized so that we can have very open conversations about how to protect people and how to hold the space. So in particular, part of this training is about bringing to people's awareness their own projections and keeping in mind that perception, whatever we see, hear, feel, kind of is our projection. Perception is projection. And we have to go through an internal training process so that we're aware of how we project our own material, our own past onto others. Unconsciously, granted, but those are the kinds of trainings that we have to go through ourselves so that when we are able to interact with a client or we're sitting for someone, that we have clean language patterns, that we're not projecting our own material, so that the identified journeyer is able to make every single choice for themselves. Every movement is, as we say, patient-led, client-led. Every sentence. There's no leading sentences or choices from the provider. None. In fact, it would be unethical because of the emotional vulnerability that they're in that time. And that ethic extends to the integration sessions as well. So that is the most important thing for anyone who's interested in doing the work, either as client or interested in getting certified, as the psychedelic renaissance and the psychedelic awakening continues.
Oh, beautiful. So there's an extreme responsibility to not only do no harm, but in your maybe misguided do goodness, to say, oh, this is what this person needs right now. I'm going to help them by suggesting this or that. And what you're saying is keep it clean, distant, supportive, but not interfering or interjecting your own story into their experience, because they're in such it's like a surgery. You have to have a clean environment during surgery so that the patient doesn't get an infection. And
Perfect.
so you need to really be clear on your, protective gear psychologically, so that you're not adding anything in, even if you think it's going to be helpful because they're in a very delicate space of trying to figure out what they best need in that moment.
Yes, the well-meaning projection sounds a lot like, this is what I know helped me, so certainly I know I can suggest it because it might help this other
Yeah.
person.
Yeah.
None of it. That's not clean.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for adding that in. That's very insightful and helpful information. Thank you.
I appreciate it. I just want to thank you so much for this opportunity. I realize that in the world of psychedelic-assisted therapy and research, I have a fairly nuanced position that I don't often get a chance to talk about. And so I really appreciate this opportunity. And also, I invite people to contact me at the contact information that you'll provide, and to check out our classes, because I'm on a mission now to provide the safe psychospiritual container that we've been describing, so that we can have more healing in the world, which is what the world needs, is a lot more healed people who are empowered to heal people, because healed people heal people.
Lovely. Thank you. It's a deep honor to know you and to spend time with you. And I know that you will have many wonderful experiences ahead of yourself in creating that mission on the earth. So thank you so much for today.
Thank you, Lori.
Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's podcast. If you want to learn more, you can visit my website for podcast and resources at hopshealingtips.com. You can also like, share, and subscribe to this channel. This podcast is for information and entertainment purposes only and is not providing healthcare advice. Please seek guidance from your professional healthcare team should you need assistance.